Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're doing something maybe a little unexpected. We're pulling just one single entry from quite a famous historical medical text. Yeah, we're going to really unpack it. The source is William Boericke's Homeopathic Materia Medica. It's been a major work in homeopathy for, goodness, over a century now. And we're focusing, really zeroing in on one remedy, Chaparro Amargosos. So our mission, if you like, is to explore all the fascinating details about this plant-based remedy and how it was used, at least according to Boericke. And, right off the bat, the common name is pretty intriguing, goat bush. That name alone, goat bush, it just sort of sparks your curiosity, doesn't it? You immediately start thinking about its properties, where it came from.
It absolutely does. And just for context, a materia medica, like Boericke's, it's basically a comprehensive collection, a compendium, really. It lists therapeutic substances, their properties, their uses, often built on tons of observation and historical practice. This specific edition we're looking at was presented by Mediti, copyrighted back in 1999, which is interesting because it shows how this kind of knowledge was compiled and kept alive, referenced again and again over the years.
Right. Okay, so let's unpack this then. When you dug into Boericke, what did you find? What was Chaparro Amargoso actually used for, according to the text?
Well, the first thing that jumps out is it's used for some pretty serious conditions, especially for that time. Boericke highlights it mainly for chronic diarrhea and dysentery, and also, interestingly, for tenderness over the liver area. But what's really striking, I think, isn't just the conditions themselves. It's the incredible precision in the descriptions. Like for chronic diarrhea, Boericke notes specifically, stools little pain, but with much mucus.
Wow, okay. Little pain, but with much mucus. That's incredibly specific detail for a historical medical text, isn't it? What does that kind of specificity, tell us about how they observed things back then? It's almost like detailed patient notes before we had modern diagnostics.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. It really underscores the meticulous observational approach they had to take. Practitioners back then, they relied so heavily on these precise descriptions of symptoms, how they changed, looking for these really subtle patterns.
Yeah.
Things that could help tell one illness from another, or maybe signal which remedy might work best. That detail about the stools, that would have been a key piece of information for a practitioner trying to decide if Chaparro Amargoso was the right fit.
Makes sense. And Boericke also mentions it acts as a tonic and antiperiodic. Could you maybe break down what those terms meant in that context?
Sure. Uranic basically meant something believed to restore health or vitality, general strength or tone to the body, often used if someone was generally weak or run down. And antiperiodic, that was for diseases that seem to recur at regular intervals. I think certain fevers, maybe malaria-like illnesses. It was meant to, break that cycle. So Chaparro Amargoso wasn't just seen as targeting one symptom, but maybe having a broader restorative or even preventative effect.
Okay, a broader effect. And what about the preparation? The text specifies the third attenuation. What does that detail tell us?
Yes, the third attenuation. That's a key detail if you're thinking about homeopathic principles. It points to a very specific process of dilution and succussion, which is a kind of vigorous shaking. The idea in homeopathy is that this process potentizes the remedy, activating its sort of energetic qualities rather than relying on the crude substance itself. So it wasn't about giving a large material dose of the plant, but a highly prepared form intended to work on a different level, according to that philosophy.
Right, a very different approach to dosage. And one last thing from the text, Boericke compares Chaparro Amargoso to other remedies. He lists kali carb, cup, wars, and caps. What's the point of those comparisons? Why include them?
Yeah, those comparisons are actually really insightful. They show Boericke wasn't looking at this remedy in a vacuum. He was cross-referencing it, placing it within a whole network of remedies. It suggests that these other substances, like kali carb or the others, might address similar symptom patterns or conditions. So it gave practitioners options, nuances to consider. It really points to a quite sophisticated system of, let's say, differential diagnosis within the materia medica itself, helping guide them to the best possible match for a patient.
Okay, so pulling it all together from this deep dive into Boericke, the key things about Chaparro Amargoso, or goatbush, seem to be its use for chronic diarrhea, dysentery, that liver tenderness, and especially those incredibly specific symptom details, like the stool characteristics, plus its role as a broader tonic and antiperiodic, and that very specific third attenuation preparation.
Exactly. And those comparisons to other remedies, showing it was part of a larger system, And what's really fascinating to me is just how specific these observations were made so long ago, down to the mucus in the stool, the precise comparisons. It really makes you think, and it leads to an interesting question for you, our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what does this all really mean for us today? This small but really detailed entry about goat bush from a knowledge base well over a century old. It highlights this incredibly careful observational approach, an approach that for centuries shaped how we understood plant-based medicine. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How did they make and record such precise observations back then? What does that tell us about the history of medicine itself and about that ongoing search for effective treatments long before we had all the technology we rely on now? Maybe take a moment to consider that enduring legacy, the legacy of such detailed traditional knowledge and how echoes of it might still resonate today in all sorts of ways.